Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into a topic that's both super fascinating and kind of a tough one.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Forgiveness. We're going deep today, beyond just like surface level apologies,
Yeah.
into the realm of like real hurt, trauma, even abuse.
Right.
Because, sometimes forgiveness is presented as this like ultimate solution, the key to moving on. But is it always that straightforward?
I mean, not necessarily.
What if pushing for forgiveness, especially too early on, actually does more harm?
It's a really good question. And it really challenges, I think, a lot of the conventional wisdom around forgiveness. Like this deeply ingrained belief that it's always the right path, the morally superior choice. But when you look closer, especially with deep wounds, it's way more complicated.
You shared this awesome YouTube video with me, How to Forgive, from the channel Therapy in a Nutshell. And get this, the therapist who made the video actually had this life-changing moment that completely flipped their whole perspective on telling people to just forgive and forget.
It's wild, right? It shows how powerful these real-world experiences can be, like how they can totally challenge our assumptions and lead to a much deeper understanding of these really complex issues.
Absolutely. And it stresses how important it is to approach forgiveness carefully, recognizing that there's potential for harm.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so picture this. The therapist is in training to work on this helpline, specifically for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence.
Okay.
And during this training, they're given this scenario. A 50-year-old man calls in. He says he was abused as a child, and he's really struggling with how to cope. Now, what do you think pops into our therapist's mind first?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems like the natural go-to, especially with how much emphasis our society puts on it.
It does. It's what a lot of people would probably think of.
But here's the twist. The trainer, who has tons of experience working with survivors, basically shuts down that whole idea of advising forgiveness, especially as an initial response. They were really firm about it, saying that suggesting forgiveness right away could actually be super damaging to someone reaching out after going through abuse.
That's a powerful statement.
Right. Totally mind-blowing. And it really makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about forgiveness.
Absolutely.
The video explains this so well. Why that knee-jerk reaction to advise forgiveness can be so harmful. Just think about it. Someone who's been abused is already carrying so much pain, shame, self-blame.
Right.
To then tell them they also have to forgive. It can feel like you're piling on even more, making them feel like they're failing somehow for not being able to do it.
It's like telling someone to win a marathon with a broken leg, right? Forgiveness, sure, it might be part of the journey eventually, but it can't be where you start, especially when someone's still processing that immediate trauma and everything that comes after. We have to remember, healing takes time. It's a process. And rushing to forgiveness can actually derail that whole thing because you're skipping crucial steps.
Right.
Processing emotions, feeling safe again, dealing with that shame and self-blame.
That is such a good analogy.
Thanks.
And the video goes on to break down some of those common myths we have about forgiveness, really getting clear on what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, it's important to be clear on that.
Like forgiving someone, it doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay or that it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it wasn't a big deal. And it definitely doesn't mean you have to let them back in your life.
Especially not if that relationship's toxic or unsafe.
Absolutely. So forgiving someone, it's not about condoning their actions or erasing the past. It's not about absolving the person who hurt you. Instead, think of it more as an internal shift.
An internal shift.
Yeah, like you're releasing those super intense negative emotions. Anger, resentment, the desire for revenge, all those feelings that can tie you to the hurt.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about finding a way to move forward without being totally consumed by those emotions. Freeing yourself from that burden from the past.
So, less about the other person, more about taking back your own power.
Yes. But not through revenge or trying to control the other person. It's about taking back control of your own emotional well-being and choosing how you want to react to the hurt. Yeah. It's like saying, you hurt me, but you don't get to define me or control my future.
Powerful stuff.
Right. And the video highlights some really inspiring stories of people who have found healing and empowerment through forgiveness. We hear about Corey Ten Boom, a Holocaust survivor who somehow forgave a concentration camp guard.
Wow.
I mean, to experience such unbelievable cruelty and still find a way to let go of the hate.
It's amazing.
It's mind-blowing.
Her story really highlights the potential we all have for compassion, even when facing the absolute worst parts of humanity. It's a powerful reminder that forgiveness isn't about saying the harm was okay. It's about choosing not to let bitterness and resentment control your life. It's about rising above the pain and reclaiming your humanity.
It really is. And then there's Chris Williams, who forgave the drunk driver who killed his pregnant wife and 2 of his children.
Oh my gosh.
Can you even imagine the depth of pain and grief?
I can't.
And yet, he found a way to forgive. Not for the driver's sake, but for his own peace, for his ability to move forward without being consumed by anger and bitterness.
His story is such a testament to the power of forgiveness to transform us, even when we face unimaginable loss. It shows that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about finding a way to heal and live a life that honors the memory of the people you've lost, without being trapped in the cycle of pain and resentment. It's about making a choice to live a life defined by love and compassion, even when it seems impossible.
Just incredible, right? How even with such a huge loss, people can still heal and even forgive. These stories are so powerful because they really show us that forgiveness is possible even in the worst situations.
They really are inspiring. But they also highlight how complex forgiveness can be. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and it definitely looks different for everyone. Like, take the story of Thorda Silva. She was raped when she was a teenager. Years later, she actually chose to go through this restorative justice process with the man who assaulted her. They talked, actually had conversations about what happened and how it affected her, and they ended up co-writing a book about their experiences. That's a really interesting example because it brings in this whole other side of forgiveness, one that's about dialogue and holding people accountable. It's not just letting go of anger, but engaging with the person who hurt you to try to understand and heal and maybe even see both people change for the better.
It's a powerful reminder that forgiveness doesn't have to be this solitary thing you do on your own. Sometimes it can mean engaging with the other person in a safe and structured way to acknowledge the harm, take responsibility, and try to find some kind of reconciliation.
And then there's the story of Dr. Izzeldin Abuelash, a Palestinian doctor who tragically lost 3 daughters when his home was hit during an Israeli strike in Gaza. Instead of being consumed by hate and revenge, he chose to forgive and became this incredible advocate for peace and understanding between Israelis and Palestinians.
Turning that unimaginable pain into something so positive. It shows how powerful forgiveness can be, how it can break cycles of violence and help build a better future, choosing hope over despair even in the face of devastating loss.
All these stories, they're all unique and amazing, but they show how forgiveness can heal people and even whole societies. They show that even after terrible hurt and trauma, we can choose forgiveness to free ourselves and move forward.
They're definitely inspiring. But it's important to remember, not everyone will have the same experience with forgiveness. For some, it might be key to healing. For others, it might not be necessary or even healthy.
Exactly. And the video stresses that too. It's not about forcing forgiveness on anyone or saying everyone has to do it. It's about giving people the tools to understand how complex forgiveness is, to really think about their own needs, and to choose a path that feels right and empowering for them.
One thing that really hit me in the video was the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. We tend to lump them together, but they're actually quite different.
Right. That's important to remember. Forgiveness, as we've talked about, is an internal process. Letting go of those negative feelings that keep you stuck in the hurt. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is about rebuilding the relationship, working to restore trust and connection.
And it's so important to know you can have one without the other. You can forgive someone for your own peace of mind without ever wanting to be in a relationship with them again, especially if that relationship was toxic or harmful.
Exactly. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to reconcile. It's about freeing yourself from those heavy feelings, not about condoning the other person's actions or opening yourself up to more harm.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems with pushing forgiveness too early, busted some myths, and looked at some amazing real-life stories, and even gotten into the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. But before we wrap up, I want to bring up another key part of forgiveness.
Right.
Self-compassion. The video mentions it, but I think it's worth diving a bit deeper.
Totally agree. Self-compassion is so important in the whole process of forgiveness, whether you ultimately forgive or not. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a good friend going through something tough. Recognizing that you're human, you're going to mess up, and you're doing the best you can with what you have.
Yeah, it's about acknowledging the pain and hurt without judging yourself, without beating yourself up for feeling a certain way or not being able to get over it fast enough. It's about letting yourself feel those emotions, processing them on your own time, and honoring your own unique healing journey.
And remember, Healing from these deep hurts, trauma, abuse, it's rarely a straight line. It can be messy, unpredictable, full of good days and bad days, and that's completely okay.
The important thing is to be kind to yourself, meet yourself where you're at, and know that you are not alone. There are people who care, there are resources out there to support you, and you have this incredible strength inside that can help you through even the toughest times.
And that strength, that resilience, that's what ultimately gives you the power to make choices that align with your values and your well-being, whether that includes forgiveness or not.
It's funny, right? We always talk about forgiveness as this huge thing, this massive decision. But maybe it's not always these big leaps. Maybe sometimes it's about the little things, the everyday kindness we show ourselves, choosing self-compassion instead of beating ourselves up.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's those small choices, those moments of self-care and understanding that can really build the foundation for deeper healing and eventually a healthier approach to forgiveness.
It's like building a house. You got to start with a strong foundation.
Exactly. And that foundation of self-compassion is so important no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's the aftermath of abuse, a tough relationship, or even just coming to terms with your own past mistakes.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive into forgiveness. We talked about the good and the bad, challenged some of those ideas we have about it, and even looked at some pretty amazing real-life examples.
We did.
But I want to circle back to that scenario from the video with the therapist in training and the man calling the helpline about his childhood abuse. Remember, the therapist's first thought was to suggest forgiveness.
Right.
Now, thinking about everything we've discussed, does that initial reaction make more sense?
It definitely does. I think it shows why it's so important to really get forgiveness, especially when you're working with people who have experienced trauma or abuse. Pushing forgiveness too soon can actually make things worse, like you're dismissing their pain and maybe even contributing to that cycle of abuse.
It's like, back to that marathon analogy, telling someone with a broken leg to just go run a race.
Exactly.
You're ignoring their pain, their need to heal, and their right to deal with it in their own time.
It's so important to create a safe and supportive space for healing to happen.
That's what matters.
And that means acknowledging the hurt, letting them feel their emotions, dealing with any trauma or self-blame, and helping them find their own way forward.
And that path may or may not include forgiveness. The key is to respect their experience, their needs, and their own timeline.
Because ultimately, forgiveness is a choice. It's not a requirement. And sometimes the best choice, the most empowering choice, is to focus on your own healing and well-being, whether or not that means forgiving the person who hurt you.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
If forgiveness is a choice, an act of taking back your story and shaping your future, what does that mean for you? How can it help you live a life that reflects your values, your strength, and your desire to heal?
Spend some time reflecting on that. Be curious. Don't judge yourself. And remember, wherever you are on your journey with forgiveness, you're not alone. There are people who care, there are resources available, and you have this incredible strength inside that can guide you towards healing and wholeness.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of forgiveness. It's been a journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep choosing the path that leads you to a more empowered and fulfilling life.